Ba-doom. All right, all right. Hello, everybody, and welcome in to Geek With Me, a brand new nerd shit podcast. All sorts of stuff for you: science fiction, fantasy, everything that falls under that banner, anything that falls in the kingdom of nerddom. So I'm very, very excited. We are kicking it off with an emphasis on science fiction, capital Psi, capital Phi, with the new season of Doctor Who. I am Colton Robertson, and I'm joined for the very first time by Beatrice, aka Shakesqueer. What's up?
Not so much, not so much. Although I say that, I feel like my week has been pretty full on. I think Doctor Who was on, and I think that's probably been quite a thing that I've heard.
Oh yes, yes. I would say so. I'm excited because I'm a relative newbie to Doctor Who and the fandom and everything, and when I've seen you post over on Blue Sky, you seem a little more seasoned in it. You've just been more plugged in for longer. How far back does your relationship to Doctor Who go?
So my relationship dates back 20 years now. We are celebrating the
Mm,
big 2 this year. I came in right at the end of Christopher Eccleston's tenure back in '05, and like Neo, I've just been plugged into the Matrix ever since, and they won't
there you
let me
go.
leave.
I love it. I love it. No, they won't. I'm officially hooked as well. My relationship does not go back nearly as far, because I'm American. That doesn't help things. But the thing is that I my relationship to a lot of nerd stuff, science fiction, fantasy, whatever. Um, it evolves from me going, okay, yeah, I'm into nerd stuff, but that a bridge too far? It happened with Game of Thrones, and now I love Game of Thrones, and then it happened with Doctor Who, and now I love Doctor Who. So I'm sure I'm excited for the next thing that I haven't given a chance because I'm like, is that am I ready for that? With Gatwa's first season was when I started watching Doctor Who. So
Oh,
I'm
so you're
I'm
like
real new.
fresh, fresh.
I'm
Yeah.
brand new. And it was a pleasure to tune in whenever that first season was going on. Me and my girlfriend decided we were going to go ahead and because we love Shooty Gatwa. That was that was actually the hook for us. Is that I'm a really big fan of Gatwa's, and I think that he does an absolutely incredible job as the Doctor. And I really wanted to go back and see more. So during the first season of Gatwa's tenure, I went back and watched Eccleston and David Tennant
Nice.
as the first, and
Those are
then
the standards. Yeah.
yes they are. And after Tennant, I was like, I need to let that breathe. It almost felt wrong to just go, I'm gonna move on. I'm gonna move right on with this. Like, no, I loved David Tennant as the Doctor. I had a great time with it. I was like, I'm gonna let that breathe for a while. So I let it breathe for a while, and then season 2 of Shooty Gatwa's tenure comes around, and I'm like, oh yeah, let's go. I'm picking up the next seasons. The Stephen Moffat, um, Matt Smith seasons, and I finished that just this week as the Shooting Gatwa season was wrapping up. Watched 5, 6, and 7 with Matt Smith. So, and I'm letting that breathe too because I loved Matt Smith as much as I love David Tennant, if not more. So I'm brand new. It's all hitting me at the same time, basically, and I'm loving it. I adore it. What has kind of kept you for so long? You said I'm plugged into the Matrix and it's not letting me go. What's keeping you here?
I think I'm just in love with the universe that it crafts. I think that, in particular, the cast and crew on this show have been so just wonderful. Like, there's just this pure energy about them, regardless of whatever may be occurring elsewhere in the fandom. It feels like the core, the show itself, is always welcoming and pushing boundaries and doing things with storytelling that you don't really see in any other show. I hear a lot of people be like, oh, this show is like Doctor Who meets, but there's no show exactly like Doctor Who. And I think that is part of the beauty of it, I think.
Absolutely. I'm with you 100%. I certainly have never watched anything that quite emulates the spirit of Doctor Who. And that's something that I've really grown to love about it is that is it absolutely corny? Yes. And I
Oh,
think
for
that
sure. Yeah, no
oh,
doubt.
and that's absolutely part of the charm. It's absolutely part of the draw for me. I love how earnest it is. You know, it always comes from a
Yeah.
really genuine place. It always feels that they are, like you said, pushing boundaries. There were moments in, you know, this season
Mhm.
where, as far as inclusion is concerned, and stories they're bringing up and stories they're telling, and the, you know, stuff that is rather poignant to the political state of the world, it's just a pleasure to see shows handle, you know, like, there are times where it can come off, you know, maybe preachy, maybe a little bit, but even then
Mhm.
it's like that's what we kind of need at a moment like this, you know, like we need somebody to go, yeah, this feels so corny, and like, yes, this is good because it is good, you know, like it's fundamentally good, it's morally sound, and I feel like we need more of that on TV, you know.
Absolutely. And I feel like you see that both on screen and behind the scenes as well. I mean, even dating all the way back to 1963, like having queer people and women and people of color just working the entire way through the show to now having our first full time Doctor of Color, because of course we did have Joe Martin for a hot sec. To
Mm.
have that, I think, has been just one of the best things that this show has ever done. I think, particularly in the current cultural zeitgeist, I think currently, given the political landscape that we find ourselves in, having a Doctor of Color is such a wild thing to do, and I'm so glad they did it.
Oh yeah, and like I said, I love Gatwa. I think that he is just such an incredible actor. He's oozing charm. He's at any given moment, like something that I've always loved as far as the doctors I've watched. You know, I watched Eccleston, Tennant, Smith, and now Gatwa. Um, I love that when it came to Tennant and Matt Smith, they kind of won you over because they're not and I'm getting very you know, material physical level here. They're not immediately like, wow, that's a gorgeous person, you know. They grow on you because the doctor is so endearing, you know. Like by the end of Tennant's run, I think he's a fucking beautiful man. By the end of Matt Smith's run, I think he's a fucking gorgeous man, you know. But immediately you're kind of like, huh. When Gatwa comes on screen, you're like, holy shit, that is a beautiful fucking person, and the personality just fits with that beauty that he has. And there's a charm and a like there's just that word beauty to him that I think is just so perfect. He is a gorgeous person.
Literally from like scene one, shoot what? Yes. Gatwa just absolutely owns the scenes that he's in. He just has this vibrancy, this energy to
Mm,
him. And I feel like, having done all of the doctors at the time, there's always this sort of cycle, right? So one doctor leaves, a new doctor comes in. It's sort of understood that they'll take a little bit to get their footing, and then once they get their footing, they can sort of go off and do their own thing. But I think that Gatwa came in and just immediately was such a different doctor that, like,
mhm.
he doesn't really compare to 14 or 13 or 12 or anyone else. So
Oh yeah, he had a presence, you know. He had a immediately. I remember from and I didn't watch any of the specials preceding Gatwa besides, you know, the Christmas special that introduces him and Ruby Sunday. That was the only one that I did get the pleasure of watching. I didn't watch the ones where Tennant was briefly back as 14 or anything like that. I'm excited to get back to it or get around to it, but I just haven't been there yet. So my introductory shot of Gatwa was the one of him dancing in that club with when we meet Ruby Sunday as well. And just immediately there's an energy about him that is gravitating. You're like, yep, that's our protagonist. You know, I love whenever a show or a movie or anything, you immediately you make eye contact, you see the person and you go, that is the person we are following. I'm supposed to love this person. I love when filmmakers and actors can do that. And Got was just got it like that. An absolute well of charisma. And I really, really loved his 2 seasons here. So we are going to be spoiling some stuff. I wanna make that
mhm.
clear. Before we go any further, if you have not watched Doctor Who, You know, you're more than welcome to stick around. If you know the premise of Doctor Who, you know that it's cyclical. You know that actors come in, actors leave. It's just kind of the nature of the show. Uh, but there are certain actors who show up that if you have not gotten it spoiled, you probably
Mm,
don't want it spoiled. Um, so I'm gonna go ahead and leave it there. If you want to stick around through spoilers, stick around. If not, no big deal. Can't blame you one bit. Um, let's talk specifically this finale of this season.
oh, sweet
The way
Lord,
that we
let's.
Yeah, I know. How did generally how did the finale strike you?
I had such a wild experience watching this because I was one of those few who went and saw it in my local theatre.
Mm,
So sitting in that theatre with an actual crowd of people is such a brilliant way, I think, to watch the show and to sort of remind you of how other people feel about the show. I think that whilst having social media is great and we can all post our thoughts afterwards, there's not a lot of sort of there's no communal experience during the episode,
mm,
right?
right.
So being able to have that communal experience, especially for a finale, is such a beautiful, wonderful thing, and I'm so glad that we've had the opportunity to do that. That said, I'm very aware that I'm very vocally responsive. And for the first 40 minutes
Mm.
of that episode, I was sat in my chair just sort of muttering to myself, going, Rad, oh, this is, wow, what's he doing? And then you sort of hit the Omega mark, right? So when Omega
Mm,
comes out,
yeah.
and you see Omega, and that was the point at which I went, oh, the next 40 minutes are going to be real vocal from this crowd. And I knew the moment Omega stepped out of that tunnel, I was like, I can't touch social media today. It's just going to be a nightmare. Because when you exist in a fan space long enough, you sort of know how people will respond.
Right.
I had fun with the episode, right? I thought it was certainly a wild ride and an experience. And in general, I think it probably works. It definitely works for that first half. And I'm still kind of making my mind up about that second half. I need to rewatch a couple of times. How did you feel about it?
Generally, like I said, I'm relatively new. I'm relatively new on Who. So I and what I have watched, I've surrendered to the ridiculousness and cornballness. I've surrendered to it completely. So the only thing that I don't love about this, because I think you're right. The first half of the episode, and frankly, both episode 7 and 8, everything in this in the dream world, um, it's a great premise. It's wonderfully executed. I love that. Love that as a jumping off point. But you're right. The second half, I do appreciate the sentiment. It is completely off the wall. It's bizarre and it's moving. Like whenever they're folding up the clothes and it's getting smaller and smaller and Ruby's noticing it. That fucked me up. I'm not gonna lie. That really got me. But I think it's all just so fast. Um,
Yeah,
I think that it was like, oh, there comes a tonal change. And there were rumors swirling, like, oh, is this going to be it? Is this going to be it for him? What's net like they've never introduced a regeneration without like announcing it beforehand or anything. Like it's going like
yeah.
so it
Literally
was
never. This is unprecedented.
it was one of those things where you feel the tonal shift and I looked at Emily and I was like, "Oh, I don't want to fuck you up or anything, but we're not going to have him as the doctor for much longer." And I was like, because I was like, Emily loves him. My girlfriend, she loves him, and we've had such a great time watching him. I'm like, and I don't want Gatwa to be done being the doctor. That's just there's a certain personal sentiment to that, because he is the first doctor that I've gotten to watch on TV when it's happening. It's been special for that reason. But also I just don't think he got his due. I think that and the idea that maybe he was always going to do 2 seasons, maybe that was always the plan. That's cool. But man, when it came time for him to go, there was a little bit of a I don't know. It almost felt like with other doctors when they've regenerated, I've been like, yep, there was no other way to do that. Felt
Yeah, yeah, I
it
definitely feel like the other doctors you've always known that they were going, so you've always sort of been allowed time beforehand to prepare for the idea of them
mhm.
leaving. So the
Yeah,
regeneration itself is always such a key aspect of the episode that you're about to watch. Whereas with this, despite the rumors circulating, they hadn't stated anything publicly. So to suddenly be hit with the regeneration out of nowhere, as exciting and thrilling as that should be as a prospect, and I think there are scenarios in which that works, not knowing really sort of, I don't know, it robbed something of the episode, I think.
I
And like you
agree.
say, he's not had enough episodes to really, I mean, he's had what, 20, if that?
Including specials, maybe close. But that's the thing is like is the only doctor in the modern era who's had less time Chris Eccleston, and it's like barely.
Literally, yeah.
Like
Yeah, because
that's
Chris
wild.
got 13, but he also got a full series, you know? Like,
Mm,
I think these 8 episode series, and a lot's been said about it, I think that they're not being used effectively enough, potentially. And it's so wild to me because I think that on the whole, the episodes that we've gotten with Gatwa have been great. I think that some of the episodes are probably the best that we've had in quite some time. But
mm.
they feel like, I don't know, the subplots or the overarching threads could do with like a couple of more episodes here or there. It just
Yeah,
feels
I'm with you.
rushed.
The exactly. One of the things that really struck me in watching this season, especially alongside the Moffat seasons with Matt Smith and Karen Gillian and Jenna Coleman, and there's a cohesion to those seasons to from the very beginning to the very end that makes perfect sense. Every little there are there are obviously little side plots that we don't pick up on, but they did a really great job of like these tiny things end up getting pulled through. These threads end up getting tied up that you're like, "Oh, wait, I didn't realize we were ever going to be doing anything with that." And when it comes to specifically this second season, I don't think it was as big a problem with the first season. Um, it felt like The Well, fucking brilliant episode. Individually, a lot of
Stellar.
the episodes we
Yeah.
got are stellar. You know, I love a lot of the individual episodes, but come the end of the season, it's almost like, oh, well, I think we spent a lot of time doing a bunch of stuff that was just kind of doing stuff, which is fun. You know, I had a fun adventure of the week sort of feel to the season. But whenever he's leaving and, you know, getting a send off for Belinda Chandra like that, who I love Arata Sethu. I think she's an incredible actress. And I think that everything we got there from her as a performer was great. But again, you know, I'm saying that Shooty Godwa got rushed off a little bit and maybe didn't get his due. I don't think she got her due either. I think it was kind of like oh, she's going to be done just like that too. It's an interesting. It was an interesting season. Sorry, excuse me. It was an interesting season because it all just felt like the start of something, not the end of something. You know?
Yeah, I think there's definitely going to be a lot said during the small hiatus that we have now between series, but I'm very aware, right, that RTD1, the Moffat era, the Triple era, they all had their overarching narratives and they were all concluded by the time those showrunners finished, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I'm aware that we're probably about halfway through RTD2. And so yeah, there's a lot of stuff unfinished. For example, that regeneration, but I think that there's still time to pay it off, and I think potentially, I'm feeling optimistic about this. Potentially, in several years' time, when it's all done, we do maybe look back and reevaluate and go, okay, maybe we did need more time to clear that off. But also, if the upcoming series are also just going to be episodes, they're going to need to be tight and on it. And
Mm.
I don't know, man. I don't know.
No, I'm right there with you, and I have considered that. You know, maybe one day we look back. You know, since this was a reboot for the show, um, maybe we look back at Gatwa as the proxy Eccleston. You know,
Yeah.
was here for a short time, did what he needed to do, got it done, and sent the show off so that it could be its own thing again. And in a new way, because it certainly doesn't feel like, to your point, it doesn't feel anything like RTD1, when it was Eccleston and Tennant. It does feel brand new. It does feel made for the 2020s. It does feel like it is very, very prevalent to now. And I think that makes the show really, really interesting. And in the streaming era, I think that what we've discussed with the shorter season format and threads kind of feeling unfinished throughout a season and maybe things not getting their complete due, I think that's a problem generally in television right now. And not to say that it's like full stop every show has this problem. No, certainly not. That's not the case at all. But I do think that this format, especially on Disney Plus, specifically concerning Disney Plus series, it's something that streaming service has fallen into an awful lot on the MCU side, some Star Wars stuff. It's like, oh, well, I love it. I had a great time week to week. I'm having a good time, but it does feel like maybe we didn't stick around long enough. We didn't get enough time to pay off the work done almost. Like I want everyone who worked on it to, I don't know, execute their vision properly. And sometimes I don't feel like they get time to do that in the streaming era.
No, I'm always thinking about the behind the scenes that they did for Shooty's first Christmas episode with the Goblins. And Russell T Davies straight up says that he has a 5-year plan, that he's looking at writing the cliffhanger for series 4 or 5. And I keep thinking about that because I don't know that that aligns with me with what we're currently sitting in, but also having sat through a lot of Russell's work, and I do think that Russell probably is one of the best writers of the 21st century. I think the stuff he writes is always poignant, and when it hits home, it really hits home. I mean, there's a lot of people critiquing his current run of Doctor Who, but he's just come off of Years and Years, which was an absolutely stunning show about the government and capitalism and how abysmal that is for the planet. Just before that, he had It's a Sin. I mean, this man, not only is he one of our best writers, but he is one of our biggest advocates, right? And I think I will always cut him a little bit more slack than other people for that, because who else in this day and age is receiving awards for writing and is openly calling out the Labour government for their treatment of trans people? It's not many people.
No, not at all.
But at the same time, Russell, buddy, what is your 5-year plan? Please just give it to us ahead of time. Like, I can't sit in the unknown,
No, yeah, and to speak to what you're speaking on there, I do. What I love about Russell T Davies' work is, like I said, it may sound like I'm dogpiling a little bit at points. The finale still made me cry. Like there were still points where I was still moved to tears. Like it and I do think that, to go back to the regeneration discussion, like if we had known a regeneration was coming, I think it automatically bakes in the stakes. I talk about how at the time I was like, wow, was there really no other way to do this? If I know a regeneration's coming going into the episode, I go, okay, so there's no other way to do this. Like I mentally am already there. I've already decided that we're doing the right thing. There's not another way out of this. And I think that, and again, like the reason he does regenerate, using some of the regeneration energy to save a life, like that's awesome. That's a
so
great premise.
Doctor.
Like it is 100% a beautiful moment in a and shoot a God, what performs it just beautifully. I mean, I absolutely adored him. And Russell T Davies approaches everything with such a poignancy and earnestness, and you can tell it's all genuine, which always helps. As long as things don't feel hollow, it doesn't feel like a choice you've made out of desperation. Like you're trying to crowd please, I'm gonna be okay with it. Which is why the ending specifically is very, very interesting. What do you anticipate is the role of Billie Piper as the Doctor?
I I think I, like most of the fandom, I'm still just in a state of shock, right? Because
Right.
obviously her return had allegedly leaked. That was one of the major rumors going in. And I don't know about you, but I was adamant she was either going to stay or they were going to do an open-ended regeneration. Like, I didn't think they were going to regen into anyone.
I
So
was
sat there and
shocked
I
when
thought,
the shot of her pop. I thought they were going to cut to black before they showed a face, and then they showed her face, and I was like, "Oh, wow!" You know, like it just it really took me out, like in a good way, because I generally felt pretty positive about it. But there's a weird lingering sense here, and you having such a richer history and longer history with the show, that sort of reveal, like you said, 20 years ago, you watched Chris Eccleston and Billie Piper. So this is a long time coming. Does I alluded to the fact that as long as stuff is done in earnestness and doesn't feel like it's desperate, it's okay. Do you think that this has any hint of that, desperation behind it?
I don't know that it's desperation, but there is something about it. And I think that regardless of what people have said, you have to give it to Russell. We've now been talking about that regeneration for almost a full week.
Right.
So if his plan was to keep us talking about this show, to keep us guessing, to keep us invested, I think he's done that. And I
Oh
think
yeah.
that in very much the same way that bringing David back for the 60th was sort of a, hey, what's going on here? Don't you want to know? And then don't you want to stick around afterwards? There has to be some element of that to Billie, because one of the things that people have picked up on is that she's not introduced as the Doctor. And I think that's such an interesting little thing, because I feel like we're always sort of playing with Russell as a showrunner. I think that Russell, deep down, is just a silly little guy, and he just really loves messing with the fans. And I think that either he deliberately hasn't introduced her as 16 because she won't be 16 and will be some variation of the Bad Wolf, or she is the 16th Doctor and he's just got us losing our minds over here, which is honestly one of the things that Russell does best. I think that Billie is probably a phenomenal choice. I think that Billie Piper doesn't really get her dues as an actor. I haven't really seen her in much since she was on the show, and that's not on her. She's been in plenty of stuff. It's just not stuff that I've got round to.
Yep.
But I think that Rose Tyler is just, she's so bubbly and charismatic in that first series. And then when she pops up again in series four, and then having her again
Mm.
for the 50th anniversary as the Bad Wolf was just, she just brings this energy of positivity with her. That smile is infectious.
Oh yeah.
Um, and like I'm intrigued. I'll give them that much.
Oh yeah, I am too, and that's why like I liked it. I won't lie. I really, really liked it because I am a fan of Billie Piper, and I'd watched the 50th anniversary special the week of the finale this week. So like I was fresh off that. I'd seen Billie Piper again. I was reminded how incredible she is. And just the energy she brings and her willingness to kind of, I don't know, throw shit against the wall and see what sticks. She has a lot of fun, and you can tell she has a lot of fun doing it. And after this, it actually motivated me to start I Hate Susie, the Max show
Yes.
she was in. I mean, I'm a couple episodes in, and I mean, like she's incredible in it. She's so charismatic, like you said. She does bring that energy. She brings that energy that like I would be okay if she was the 16th. I think it would be more interesting, and I imagine that there's probably something more going on there, that it is a bad wolf sort of thing. Um, but either way, like you said, I'm interested. I want to know. I will be coming back, and I think that's. I mean, that's all you got. That's all I'm really asking for at the end is something that makes me want to keep coming back. It didn't pull the rug out from under me in a bad way. It was in the best way.
Yeah.
I loved it. I was knocked off my feet.
No, I get that. And I think if we're going to theorize, and what else are we here for if not to theorize about Doctor Who?
Yeah.
I think that potentially reality has broken. I think that that's going to be a major theme of the series when we come back. Is I think that visual shattering of the mirror of the glass around about Shooty's regen, I think that that is metatextual within the show itself. And I think that warping reality in that way, even just as an excuse to have Billy back, I think it's totally fine. I think that giving her a full series would be really neat. I know that a lot of people have wondered if she'll get a 3 episode run like David, but
Mm.
they haven't filmed the next series or two or three, and we're still officially waiting on that word for the series to be revived. But it will, because the BBC are going to keep making this show regardless of whether or not they have that Disney money.
Right.
Um, but yeah, no, I think that there's been a lot of fourth wall breaking and sort of metatextual things going on, and I think that
Mm.
Russell is going to lean real hard into that. I think.
I think you're right. I think just throughout the season there was a lot of that. That whenever they are, don't make me laugh. I loved the premise of that episode. If not for me, the
Oh, yeah.
execution was a little spotty, but I did love the idea of it and the part whenever they meet Doctor Who fans. And they literally talk to them for a second. I thought it's a lot of fun, and the meta text that they are dealing with. I think that it makes sense that they are going to do almost a Loki god of storytelling sort of thing. Again, I forgot that they literally mentioned Loki, the god of storytelling, in this show. So, like, in this season, that was another great episode. That's why I'm like, maybe you're right about there being a lot of stuff that ends up getting pulled through, that ends up tying together in that reality warping, reality breaking sort of way. Um, and I'm just excited. It's a fun place to leave the show. And you're right, BBC is going to make it no matter what. And frankly, I don't think the Disney money strictly added a ton. Um, I thought that the VFX were a little bit above and beyond compared to what I saw. I mean, but even what I saw would have been over 10 to 15 years ago in the last series that I've watched. So like VFX have evolved generally anyway. But I really, really I just look forward to the future of it. I think that we are in such a fresh new spot. It doesn't feel like anything that's come before it, as far as what I've seen, and judging by what you're saying, it doesn't feel like anything you've seen either. So I have a lot of faith that that's going to continue. Um, Something that was fun for me and provides me an interesting uh, new, like, just as a new viewer, is that was my first time meeting Jodie Whittaker. The
Oh
third.
my gosh! So it would have been, yeah. How was that?
It was good. I loved her as 13. I thought that was a wonderful pull-in. It was a great intro to the character, actually. And there's stuff that they're alluding to with you never tell them that you love them, but they know, and all that stuff. Like, and that's really quintessentially Doctor stuff. Like, I already kind of, no matter what I love about the show is that it's the same person. I love that it's been depicted by so many different people, but the history exists. It's all there. I love that sense of uh, ancientness that the Doctor has. I love how much you can see through the actors in their eyes. You can see how long they've been alive, which is fascinating since it's really, really incredible acting. And Jodie Whittaker, she was immediately charming, immediately fascinating, and someone that I'm really excited to get around to now. And just seeing her and Ncuti Gatwa on screen, like, that makes perfect sense. I love that they got their moment. I thought that was lovely. Um,
It was so sweet, and I think because no one was expecting it either, because Doctor Who fans, like any fans, always have things that they'd like to happen in a finale, and I feel like there were a lot of theories as to what they could do. But Jodie coming back even for a small cameo, I don't think was even on many people's radar. So to be sat in the theater when Jodie appeared,
Yeah.
like the joy that rippled through that crowd, just unparalleled. I think that and the little Matt Smith cameo, even just being archive footage, seeing
Mm.
Matthew Smith on the big screen and then John Pertwee as well, like Russell T
Yeah.
Davies really looked at all of the series and went, "Oh, you want Matt? You want Jodie? You want Daleks? Well, technically, I'm going to give you all three. You're welcome."
Yeah.
And
Right.
that's
Right.
just, yeah,
No, I love it. Well, and like you said, that communal space is so important in
yeah.
that regard because, like you said at the top of the episode, social media, a lot of the negative stuff gets a lot of traction. Um,
Mm.
I was on Twitter during Jodie Whittaker's time as the Doctor. So, and I understand that everything that I saw on Twitter about Jodie Whittaker as the Doctor is in terrible taste. Like
Oh
it's
yeah.
I understand. Like obviously, I know what platform I'm on. I know what's happening here. And the same thing happens with Star Wars, the Star Wars fandom, obviously. Like one of the most important things for me in recent years as a Star Wars fan was that clip of Daisy Ridley at a Star Wars Celebration a couple years ago when they announced that she was going to be coming back, and the entire crowd goes absolutely ballistic. You almost forget that and not to harp on the Star Wars thing, there are more of us. There are more people who want to love it, who love loving it, and I think that whenever you do get a chance to watch something you love with other people that love it, it just always makes it better. So I do. I take a great deal of joy in knowing that there were people out there who saw Jodie Whittaker come back and went, "Oh my goodness, I love this. That makes me so happy." Because I instantly loved her. I thought she was going to be I saw her, I recognized her, it's not like I'm completely out of the know, I knew who she was as soon as she popped up, and I thought that was exciting and interesting, and, now I can't wait to get to her. I can't wait to see her seasons because, I've been excited for that ever since I started Doctor Who, just to catch up generally, and then go back and watch the old stuff, because I'm completely blind to that too. I'm assuming you've watched all of it, right?
Not actually. Before I dive into my classic Who, I think the one thing that I'm always thinking about when I'm watching something and then when I go to interact with social media is something that one of my sort of film critic mentors back when I did the youth course, her name's Ella, I think she said to me that maybe about 2% of people exist on social media, and so you shouldn't take their word as the end all. And I've really,
Mm,
I've held space with that. And I think that once you know that and once you appreciate that, it sort of really helps the way that you perceive yourself in the fandom space. And I think that being in those big public spaces as any kind of fan, with any fan of anything else, doing the Doctor Who finales in the cinema, I did the Star Wars sequels in the cinema. I went to the midnight screening of The Rise of Skywalker, and
mm,
you go on Twitter, but being there on the night, there was just an appreciation. Even rewatching the Lord of the Rings trilogy in a theater, there's just this love, and I think
mm,
that's that should be and almost unanimously is at the heart of fandom, but it's the vocal minority, right? But even
right.
against that on social media, you still have, like you say, people in the Star Wars fandom. There was a couple of fundraisers done for trans people recently, and things like that are just beautiful. And then
Oh,
to
yeah.
circle back around to classic, who I I must admit that I am not as up on it as my best friend is. He's a Doctor Who fan through and through. His family,
Mm,
his parents grew up watching the show, so he's well versed. But I
right.
have done some stories from at least every Doctor. Um, the Paul McGann is always easy because Paul McGann just has his little TV movie, and that's fine. It's a lovely little movie. I'm glad that's getting appreciated now because on its release, boy, how did the people have thoughts. But I think that each Doctor really has their own sort of unique vibe that they bring to the table. And again, the show just has that charm. We used to joke about Doctor Who being made on like a £5 budget. But when you watch that old show and like the sets wobble and the TARDIS is made out of cardboard, like like that's the show. That's the
Yeah.
show.
I love that. That's why I'm like, I whenever I start to love something, and I'm like I said, I'm fresh on Doctor Who. I want all of it. And so I do intend on watching as much of it as I possibly can. And
Mhm.
what's interesting is that, like I said, I'm also really sentimental. So like I just finished Matt Smith's run as the Doctor, and Got was within the same week. Um, it'll be a little bit before I pick up Capaldi, like it'll be a little bit because I like letting their performances breathe. So I don't even know how long it'll take me to finally get through everything. I don't even know how long it'll take before I officially get to Jodie Whittaker. But that's what I love about the show is that it feels brand new while still maintaining its heart. There's something at the core of it that just feeds that sentimental, overly emotional movie and television watcher that I am. It absolutely it makes me feel the things I love. I'm a sucker every time the Doctor says nobody dies. That's my favorite. I love it. Everything just clicks in moments like that. I'm like, yes, this is why I watch this show. And I think that the earnestness and the beauty and the soft touch it uses in being so overly corny it's so much fun, and it brings me so much joy. So and this season did not disappoint me. I had a fantastic time.
I would be interested to know, as someone who's only recently done Midnight from Tennant's era, how did you feel about The Well being a surprise sequel to that? Because I know people had thoughts, but people always have thoughts.
Oh, I loved it. I was thankful that it was a continuation of a story I had watched. There was I loved when when it clicked into place, like, oh, that's what we're doing. Oh shit. Hell yeah. Like it did excite me. I was excited to be in on it. And because I didn't think I was going to have things like that. What's cool too is that my girlfriend Emily was not in on it, and it was every bit as good to
Oh,
her as it was to me. Um, so that I thought that kind of just spoke to the strength of the episode itself. That she had questions. She was like, "Oh, what is it?" And I explained what happened. And she's like, "Oh, that's cool." Like it wasn't like it was that big of a deal. It didn't take her out. It didn't make her completely void of context, and that's a sign of a really good episode of television that you can still see just how good it is even without the context. And but no, that did really really satisfy me. I thought it was a fantastic episode. Probably for me, certainly the best of the season. Um, and kind of leaves us on a cliffhanger with there's a little bit. I also appreciate that. Like I said, nobody dies. There's a certain spirit that whenever it comes to the villains, we feel like we've seen them for the last time, and then nope, they'll be back. That's exciting. I love stuff like that.
the villains in Doctor Who are always just like lingering around the corner somewhere, and I think
Mhm.
that's brilliant. And I think that with a show like Doctor Who, after 62 years, episodes are gonna leave those who haven't really been with the show for a while with questions, and I think that's probably just part and parcel of having something that is 62 years old. I think it's probably the same with the MCU and Star Wars. There'll be little references and callbacks, and people will be like, oh, what's this about? And then you, as a fan, get the joy of telling them about it. I've always felt like filling people in on the lore is so much
Oh,
more of a delight than it is a chore. I love just sitting someone down and being like, so,
so here's the deal.
Susan,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I'm with
Because
you.
my friend
I love
with
that.
I had a friend visiting recently, so she was over the week that the Eurovision episode went out, the Interstellar Song Contest,
Mhm.
and that was her very first episode. She'd never watched an episode before, and she
Oh.
had questions naturally, but at the end of that, she went, "Okay, so Doctor Who's actually really good," and I was like, "Yeah."
Oh, yeah. Well, and the Interstellar Song Contest was a brilliant episode in its own right as well. It was oozing with that charm and spirit of, I mean, any given Doctor Who episode. And I love that it also put on display the power of song, which is, again, corny, but I loved it because that anthem that she sings at the end,
Oh, it's
not a real
stunning,
song,
even without the
not singing
yeah,
real lyrics, like, but I'm moved. I'm moved beyond imagination because again, that's just the power of the storytelling they're putting on. And yeah, when it came to uh the more long-term pull-throughs that they used, like the Ronnie this season, that stuff I was a little, I mean, obviously clueless on as far as the history of it. I don't know how prevalent she was or how around she was. I don't know any of that. But what I do love is that the implied history is enough, like
yeah,
knowing that she did face off with the doctor, and she does have a history with them. It's enough to go, okay, she's gonna be a problem, like, and I really liked that villain. I thought that was a fun, the bi-generation thing was interesting. Um,
yeah. I
I
think
was thinking
that
that I thought they might be building to that, in fact, at the end of this episode, that maybe Shuti would bi-generate, but I'm glad they didn't do that.
yeah, I think the bi generation definitely in terms of 14's regeneration is probably one of the coolest and best things that this show has ever done. Like, I think that as a storytelling technique for what it needed to do, it worked perfectly. And then again, to have it with Mrs. Flood and the Rani, I think it also works brilliantly. And I think that one of the things the show does really well is it gives you the context, right? So you can go in knowing nothing about the Rani, but the show sort of goes, hey, she and the doctor, they've got beef. That's all you need. But in
Mhm.
particular with the Rani, to catch up, there is only two stories, which is always nice. So she faced off against Doctors number 6 and 7. So that is Mark of the Rani and Time of the Rani, and
Mm,
they're very of their era. They just have that 70s charm to them.
yeah.
Time of the Rani is actually Sylvester McCoy's first episode as the Doctor. That's his regeneration story. And so I think it's
Huh.
actually really interesting to have sort of that bookend of her being almost present for two regenerations because she just sort of made a two Ronnies joke in depth. And you know what? I'm all right with that.
Right, right. Yeah, I thought, and I'm really, really excited to see, just like, I don't know. I appreciate, again, I keep falling back on it, but it's just the earnestness that they deliver, even exposition is always delivered in such a way that it's like, doesn't really matter. You don't need to know that. What's important is what we're doing. Like, that's like, whenever he's like, I should be happier than I've ever been. It means I'm not alone in the universe, but she's a nightmare, so we've got to deal with it. Like, I loved that was the idea, because again, to a new Who viewer who hasn't been around long, understands that there are no Time Lords left, all that stuff, you'd go, wait, isn't the Ronnie kind of a big fucking deal as a Time Lord, or a Time Lady? And him being like, I should be happy, but I'm not. She sucks. Let's fight. Like, I love that. That's so simple and to the point, and it conveys everything you need to know about their history.
It's amazing that this show has such a rich, complex tapestry of lore. And at the end of the day, it just goes, yeah, the Ronnie's a bitch. We're dealing with that. Like,
Yeah, no, and like, one of the things that struck me whenever I first started watching the early series of the modern Who, was the Daleks being a recurring threat. Initially, I was like, "What are we doing?" Don't every time they send the Daleks off, we think it's going to be it, and then they'd come back, and then they send them off, and we think it's going to be it, and then they send them off, and eventually, I surrendered. I surrender to that, because I'm like, this is just how the show works. That's awesome. I love that. So I do appreciate that. No matter what, anything is safe to come back, which I think is so interesting, because they still, you would think that would give huge moments less weight. You'd think that whenever companions go, whenever they leave, or whenever they get sent back in time and get to live their whole life, et cetera, et cetera. it still hits as hard as it needs to, even though it's it's uniquely possible that you will see them again very, very soon. Um, and that's just the privilege of time travel stories, like one of the things that struck me with Eleven's last run is the amount of time he spends on Trenzalore. Like, he was there for hundreds of years, or like he
Yeah.
stayed and stayed and stayed and stayed in one episode. And the fact that you can tell a story like that where he lives lifetimes in 45 minutes, that's fucking awesome. I love stuff. I love that this show has that capability, and it just gives them so much freedom to do whatever they want. Um, and
That's the
it
show,
just
right? Is you can just do absolutely anything at any time. And I think if you love that kind of thing, one of the episodes that gets sort of the most talked about from Capaldi's era is, I think, is it Listen? It's right near the end of his tenure, but he spends just forever trapped in this little time loop, and it's just him, like, as a little singular bottle episode.
mm,
And that that whole story, just the power of storytelling, like that's Moffat at its best, and it's the show at its best, you know.
oh yeah, no, and that was something that I got really excited for whenever I was approaching the Moffat seasons. Was historically, when I was watching the RTD seasons early on, my favorite episodes kept being the ones that were written by Moffat. I was like, oh. And then I learned that he became the showrunner, and I was like, oh, let's go. Like, there's an excitement there that I don't know. I just, with this show more than with most shows, and like a lot of shows do have a consistent writing team and directorial team and all that stuff. So like there's a little bit less variety. Um, but I'm so fascinated by the behind the scenes, and like I appreciate that all the storytellers who do get to play with Who, their episodes have their own feel. Like, you can tell almost when an episode was written by Moffat. You can tell when an episode was written by Davies, and I think that's the mark of a good writer, to be sure to be able to put your signature on something without being like, I wrote this. Can't you tell? Like, it's a again, it just comes from such a genuine place, and it's lovely.
And I think it's really nice that they're all sort of just mates. Like,
Right,
the
just buddies.
social media discourse can do what it wants, but Russell, Stephen, and Chris are just like, yeah, no, just three lads. We wrote a show. We hang
Yep.
out. It's fine. Like,
No,
and
just
having
I
them
mean, it's
support each other like on social media as well, and in that episode where they speak to the fans, they're like, "Oh yeah, no, the best episode is Blink," and that's a Moffat episode, and Moffat didn't know that was coming, but he took to social media to be like,
oh, that's funny.
"Yeah, no, they're right,
they're right. Yeah, I love that. I
they're
love
right."
that. Yeah, I mean, like, it's an all timer. It's a classic. That's one of those. Like, earlier, I mentioned that Emily was out of the know when it came to the pull throughs that happened in the well episode. But her mom, her stepmom, watched a lot of Who growing up. So like, they're when she was growing up. So there's a lot of stories that she does know. She has seen. So every once in a while when I'm watching it, she's like, "Oh, I know this one." And like, one of them was Blink. That's one of the ones that she always goes like, I remember that one. That one stuck with her, cuz and I do, I mean, generally I appreciate the threat that episode introduces, and then anytime you see statues for the rest of the show, you're like, no, fuck no. Like, I love that something so simple as that is forever, forever baked in. It's such a great, like, there's statues everywhere. And now every time I blink, I'm nervous around them.
Right. I feel like one of the great joys of the show is enjoying the show, but there are also curses that come with the show, and one of those curses is that they will just take the most ordinary, mundane things, like statues, like blinking, like a darn giggle, and they'll just make them terrifying. Like,
Right.
it's been how long, and I still don't look at statues the same way. Like, the
Keep your
impact the
eyes
show
on it.
has had.
Keep your eyes on it.
I'm
Yeah.
sending
Don't
sending them
look
my
away.
therapy bill.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. And that's why, like, I one of my favorite subgenres of sci-fi is horror sci-fi. I think that is absolutely, I mean, because there's inherent terror in the unknown. And that's what I love about Doctor Who, is that it understands that also more. I mean, easily at least half the episodes are horror sci-fi, like that is
Oh,
the
yeah.
vibe that they're going for. And I adore that. I just absolutely love it. And that's something that I think with the modern era here, this most recent reboot, that it feels like they might have gone away from that just a little bit. Um and not to the show's detriment or benefit, I don't think. It's just interesting that tonally these two seasons have felt lighter than previous seasons of Who. Would you agree with that?
I think I would probably agree with that. Yeah, there was certainly a darkness, I think, to the Moffat era in particular. And
Mm.
then
Yeah, the
even
silence and all that
RTD's,
stuff was inherently terrifying to look at.
right, right. And that's another thing that's like, I can't look at tally marks the same way ever again. So
Mm.
thanks for that, Stephen. But even when you look at RTD1, and I think there is a natural tendency to look at that because you're comparing it to his second turnaround, I think that yes, there's sort of this camp, fun energy to the '05 run, but it certainly had its really dark moments. Ten was sort of a doctor, I think, that was known for he could absolutely commit a genocide if someone was not sort of reining him in. And I don't
Mm.
know that I particularly get that sort of tone with Shooty. I think he's a phenomenal actor, and Russell has said in the behind the scenes stuff that he plays every emotion really well, and he does. But also, I wonder if he jumps between all of the emotions, and there's not this. I don't know. It's sort of. I don't want to say it feels cobbled together, but there's this energy to these last two series where you're right. It sort of felt like we're jumping in as opposed to we're solidly sitting with it.
Mm.
And that's insane because some of these episodes have had really dark moments. I mean,
Oh, absolutely.
Lux Lux is a demigod and he just is the universe now, and that's kind of horrifying. But at the
Right.
same time,
Right.
They got Alan coming to voice him, so you just can't be scared of him, you know?
Yeah. No, yeah, like you're right. Like that was a dark. The Well was obviously a dark episode. There's elements to the barbershop episode that are pretty dark. Like it's not like it's void of that darkness, which is fascinating. I just think that there's a levity that they end up being able to handle it with, and maybe this emphasizes the sort of presence of Ncuti Gatwa, is that there's a little bit of a they do a really interesting job of blending melodrama with comedic sensibility and levity. I think I whenever the thing that I remember most about Ncuti Gatwa as a performer, as opposed to the other doctors I have watched, is that he'll cry. He's emotional. Like
Oh yeah.
he actually he feels the things. Like one of the things that really struck me in the Moffat era with Matt Smith was that there's one, like whenever Jenna Coleman tells Matt Smith, Trenzalore, she said Trenzalore. Matt Smith immediately breaks down into tears, and you go, "Oh wait, I haven't seen this guy cry."
Yeah.
It's been 2.5, almost 3 seasons, and I haven't seen this guy cry, and it immediately gives that moment weight. Um, and I'm not saying that because he cried all the time and because he cried more and felt more that it removed the weight from moments. I don't think it did that at all. It's just interesting to see that, like, maybe that might be the defining trait I assign to 15, is that, like, he felt more. He didn't put on any facade strictly. It didn't feel like, as far as an intimidating presence. Every, like you said, Tennant, you're like, that guy's dangerous. Smith, you go, that guy's dangerous. Eccleston, you go, that guy's dangerous. Gatwa has a softness to him that I think ends up making him a lot more loving than previous doctors, which is interesting because they are all obviously very loving. They're very full of life and want to protect life at all costs. But there's an empathy that I think Gatwa puts on that ends up making him the softest of them.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. And I think what's interesting is that 15 chooses to regenerate. Like he doesn't have to. There's nothing forcing him to
Mm.
regenerate, but that's a choice that he makes to save Poppy, and I think the closest thing that we've had to that in New Who is potentially Eccleston's regeneration because he absorbs all that regen energy to save Rose. He does a very selfless thing, knowing it will probably kill him. And I think
Right.
that selflessness is part of what makes the Doctor just so inherently likable. There's never a point where you go, oh no, he'd willingly let these people die. And so
No, never.
when there are moments where he does act like that, you go, oh, something is like catastrophically wrong here. Like when he
Yeah.
goes off the rails against Kid in the Interstellar Song Contest, you sort of go, oh, oh, Kid's pushed a button, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's what's interesting too is that you because the Doctor changes faces, it's easy to forget, at least as a relatively new viewer, that everything that happened to the last one happened to this one. You know, like
Yeah.
it all exists in there. So after however many years 15's at by now, like that's a lot of experience. That's a lot of darkness. That's a lot of pain to have endured. And it's the spirit, the light in the face of all of that darkness that makes the Doctor who they are. I absolutely adore it. And it is one of those shows that instantly has asserted itself amongst my favorites of all time. Um, even with the vast array of tones and sometimes quality, but even then I always think it maintains a certain spirit that makes me love it. So I'm incredibly appreciative of what Gatwa did as the Doctor. I think that I'll appreciate him forever. And I do think that there is an element to it that we will end up looking back and going, okay, this was the Eccleston for this era. It wasn't around long, but reset the show in a way to set it on a new path a little bit. And I think that's exciting.
Yeah, I've always felt like, and I think I said this to someone about halfway through the first season, I always sort of felt going in that the two seasons were going to act as one season. Like they may
Mm.
have been shot separately and scripted separately, but I think that overall, I think that very much, especially given how few episodes relatively are in it, I think that Shooty's run sort of feels almost like one whole season. It's like a fresh series, right?
Right.
It's sort of like the series one of Parks and Rec. You know, they did all of that, and then they couldn't adjust series two because they'd kind of already filmed it, that kind of thing. So I think that'll be really interesting to see, and I think that's probably the thing that has everyone has felt leaving this finale, whether or not you enjoyed the finale, whether or not you had issues with it. I think everyone would agree that we're all sort of keeping our eyes peeled. And even if we don't come
Mm.
back to the show, we might dip back in to see what they do next because that's what the show does. It invigorates, it keeps it fresh, it like keeps you on your toes.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why it's awesome. That's why it's beautiful. And that like I said, time and time and again, there's just a beauty in how sensitive the show is. Like it just knows it has such a firm moral compass, I think that and that makes it so like one of the most interesting choices in the finale was Ruby talking to Conrad and him her being like, "And the world you created really isn't that bad." Like nobody's in pain, nobody's suffering, like it was fascinating to kind of add that touch. Um is there an element of a little bit of a you know, both sidesy sort of thing there? Maybe just a little bit, but I really do appreciate the idea that even this guy who's scum fucking hate Conrad. Oh my god.
The worst,
Um
absolutely throw him into
oh
a fire.
my god. Just kind of the embodiment of everything I fucking despise about everything right now. And I loved that even scum of the earth like Conrad can listen to the Doctor and go, "Oh, he's right about that." Like people just want a roof over their heads and food to eat and people around them. Like that is what people want. And I think that it's fascinating that even someone as shitty as Conrad can look at the Doctor and go, He got that right. He knows that.
Yeah, everyone's worth saving at the end of the day. Like
Mm-hmm.
deep down, everyone's a person.
Yep.
And yeah, that can be very same-sidey, but also it takes so much energy to hate these days, and you don't need that in your life.
No, not at all. Not at all. And that's I really, really did love that did feel like the point a little bit of these 2 seasons was just, I don't know, making sure you just love, man. Just love, man. It's love tars, in the words of Matthew McConaughey in Interstellar. Um, and I adored it though, and I think we've done its due diligence here on the new Who here, and I can't wait for what's to come next. I sure hope that I can have you back to discuss some more Doctor Who and maybe some Star Wars at some point if you're interested in that. Um,
Oh, I will absolutely discuss anything with you. There's no getting rid of me now.
I love it. I love it. I can't wait. But yeah, I mean, I've got ideas too. Don't worry. Like I've got things cooking in the mind that I'm ready to present to you as potential stuff down the road. But thank you so much for joining me and talking to a newbie like me. 20 years deep in Doctor Who, not stopping anytime soon, and I'm a little over a year, and I don't plan on stopping either. I can't wait till I catch up to you. But yeah, this was a great pleasure. Thank you so much, B.
No, thank you so much for having me. I'm always happy to share the lore and to chat with you. It's always a delight.
Absolutely. Thank you so much again. But we, I mean, the show Geek With Me will be back soon. Me and Joseph do intend on doing a Pride Month episode in the Star Wars vein. We're doing something fun. It's going to be a draft. We haven't done a draft for like characters and stuff in a while, or it's a really broad thing. We're going to use the Pride flag as a basis. Um, we're going to be doing, and we're going to draft something from Star Wars that embodies those colors in the flag. So something red, orange, green, yellow, blue, purple. If that's a lightsaber, if it's a weapon, if it's a person, if it's an outfit, if it's anything, if it's a ship, whatever. It's just really broad strokes Star Wars draft, and I'm very, very excited to celebrate Pride Month in that capacity. We're also celebrating Pride Month on The Cinementalists, our movie podcast. I mentioned being a sentimentalist so much this episode that our movie podcast listeners might have understood why I named it that, The Cinementalists. But we're celebrating Pride Month over there. This Friday brings us Portrait of a Lady on Fire. We're discussing that this week. Next week, we've got Luca Guadagnino's Queer. The week after that, we are doing Moonlight and I Saw the TV Glow. And then we're topping off the month with The Handmaiden. So I'm looking forward to that. Leave a 5-star rate and review and download wherever you might be listening. You can subscribe on YouTube and listen there. I might need to rebrand the YouTube manually after it might still be Fulcrum, a Star Wars podcast. So be on the lookout for that. But yeah, Beatrice, would you mind plugging anything that you want to build up for yourself? I know you do a lot of writing. I know you do a lot of posting. Tell the people where they can find you.
If there's anything I do, it's post. You can find me on most of the social medias. I am on Blue Sky, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. That's at Shakesqueer3. I usually have to put a 3 because just regular Shakesqueer is taken. And you can now find me on the Clock app over on TikTok. I am Copeland.b. That is BEA, not just the letter B. And I'm over at WordPress at Shakesqueer as well. Don't worry, I'm sure that Colton will remember to link to all of these, and you can peruse my 6 years worth of content at your own leisure.
Love it. I love it. Yep. Be on the lookout for Shakesqueer. A lot of great writing too. A lot of great writing. I appreciate your criticism work. I always really like reading whatever you decide to write about. But there's a there's a lot out there. So go ahead and look into it. But yeah, I look forward to having you back, B. Thank you so much one more time again for joining me. And I can't wait to talk to you about something soon.
Yeah, I'll see you in the time stream.
I'll see you in the time stream. And remember, everybody, go watch some good Doctor Who. Have fun. Bye-bye.
Bye.